The DS. This console is very great and it has some really fun games to play. I'm going to make my personal list of top 15 DS games. Now, unlike most of my lists, this is not going to be a one per franchise list. So you will see more than one game from at least one franchise on the list. Also, here's an obvious warning, but there will not be any 3DS games on here. Just the normal DS. So let's get this video started. We all know about nostalgic rehashes, and New Super Mario Bros. For the DS is no exception. While I don't like it as much as I like the Wii sequel, this is still really fun. While the 3D games are fun and all, this is the first Mario game to use the classic formula within 16 years. Well, not counting the remake of Super Mario World that came out in 2002. And this game introduces some new power-ups that are very fun to use, such as the Mega Mushroom, which lets you plow through everything, the Mini Mushroom, which lets you shrink to tiny size and go through some awesome bonus rooms, and the Super Blue Shell, which lets you move like a Koopa Shell and break through blocks. It also has 8 different worlds, giving it a big variety: grassland, desert, beach, swamp, snow, mountain, clouds, and lava. It also brings back some of Mario's moves from the 3D games. It also has a few mini-games that are pretty addicting. They do get a bit stale after a while, but maybe that's just my fault because I played them a lot. The game overall is a great rehash to the Mario series. So why is it only number 15? Well, to be honest, even I don't know the answer. I don't know what it is. I think it's a really great game, but there's just something about it that keeps me from liking it as much as I should. The Fire Emblem games are really fun strategy-based RPG games. But why wasn't the original released in America? Why did you do this to us, Nintendo? Thankfully, it did get remade 19 years later, and it is awesome. This game doesn't have some of the stuff that Sacred Stones had, like being able to go back and train, but it's still a great game for people to start in the Fire Emblem universe. It has several different classes that have different abilities in it. This game really requires strategy to complete it. Some characters can only be recruited through certain cutscenes triggered by certain characters. Some classes in the game are weak to other classes, so it requires very well placement. The most important factor in the gameplay is that once a character dies, it doesn't come back after the battle. It actually dies and you can't use it anymore, like one of those Pokemon Nuzlocke runs. You can revive one fallen character towards the end of the game, but only if you get the Alm Staff. There are also some Gaiden chapters you can play if you have little enough characters. This game overall is really good. Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days, while being regarded by some fans to be one of the worst in the Kingdom Hearts series for being a copy-paste sequel of the other Kingdom Hearts games, people at least praise it for the relationship between Roxas and Xion, and at least it feels more different than Kingdom Hearts Recoded. While it doesn't have as much Disney stuff as the other Kingdom Hearts games do, it's still very fun. In this game, you play as Roxas, and it takes place between the events of Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2. This game uses missions, as well as a mission menu, allowing you to do the missions as many times as you want. The only negativity is that it kinda takes out some of the exploration. While the overworlds have pretty much the exact same layout as in the other Kingdom Hearts games, at least Neverland has a different layout, where you can actually play on Neverland outside of Captain Hook's pirate ship. One thing I really like about this game is that you can team up with other organization members, which is really fun. The bosses aren't as good as most Kingdom Hearts bosses, because some of them are pretty much just souped up enemies, but there are also some very original ones as well. Overall, it may not be perfect, but it's a really fun game. Okami Den. This game may not have done all that it can in terms of sequels, but it's still great. It has a really nice art style like the original Okami, and beautiful graphics. They're not as amazing as Okami, but it's not expected to since it's a DS game, and so it's expected that the graphics will be somewhat pixelated. Chibi-Terasu isn't as awesome in terms of style as Amaterasu is, but he shows more of a personality, not to mention a humorous and cute personality. This game also has some great boss battles just like the original game. I don't really have much else to say about the game except it's a great sequel. Kirby Superstar was a great game, but Superstar Ultra is everything better. Superstar already was great with its multiple storylines, which I enjoyed this concept much more than Game & Watch Gallery 4. Spring Breeze, which is pretty much a remake of the original Kirby's Dreamland. Dynablade, where Kirby has to chase down Dynablade and stop her from taking Dreamland's crops. Gourmet Race, where Kirby, races King Dedede for who can get the most food, which is actually kind of addicting. The Great Cave Offensive, which is really fun to explore and get certain items. Don't worry, the game has a map that allows you to keep track of where you are. Revenge of Mennonite, where Kirby has to fight against Mennonite, who wants to take over Dreamland. Milky Way Wishes, where you have to stop the Sun and Moon from fighting by summoning Nova. And the Arena, where Kirby faces all of the bosses he faced in the game. However, Superstar Ultra made it even better by making the cutscene CGI. You can play it on the go, and now there are 4 new games. Okay, granted, they can be considered remakes of some of the other games, but at least it makes it longer. We have Revenge of the DDD, which is a harder version of Spring Breeze, Helper to Hero, where you face some new bosses while playing as a helper, Meta Nightmare Ultra, where you can play as Meta Knight, which is awesome, and you can run through some of Kirby's past levels in the game, so you can fight against Galactonite, and lastly, the True Arena. Here you face the toughest enemies in the game, and trust me, it's very difficult. I may not have played Superstar, but I don't need the game, since this game is pretty much everything better than the original. In my eyes, the Mario Kart series seem to get better and better as they go on. Well, except for Super Circuit, which I think is better than Super Mario Kart, but not as good as the N64 version. And, forget it. You already know what entry is going to be on the list. There's only one Mario Kart game for the DS, and that is, Mario Kart DS. I probably would enjoy this game more if I hadn't played the Wii version first, so I kind of knew about the innovation brought to us in Mario Kart DS, so I kind of knew what to expect. Even still, I'm still grateful they brought us online mode and the retro tracks. And also, even though it doesn't have a lot of touchscreen control, the fact that on the bottom screen you can zoom in on the map lets you get a better glimpse of what's going around you. The tracks it introduced also have very great level design, and while I do prefer Mario Kart Wii and 7 over this game, there's one thing this game does that those two don't. Mission mode. Most of the missions are admittedly kinda easy, but they're so fun to play through, which different missions, such as racing backwards and even fighting bosses. Bosses in a Mario Kart game, alright! I sure hope Mario Kart 8 brings this feature back. Anyways, it's no wonder that Josh Scorcher considers this to be his favorite Mario Kart game. This game is really fun overall. You know, I think that part of the reason I think I hated Guardian Signs is because I expected way too much of it because of how much I enjoyed its predecessor, Shadows of Almia. I made a rant about Guardian Signs 3 years ago saying I hate the game, but that only goes to show that you need to think twice about a game before you form an actual opinion on it. I actually do appreciate some of the improvements they made on the game. I mean, drawing signs to summon a Pokemon is at least better than having to capture one Pokemon every time. And I appreciate you can have up to 7 Pokemon from the start. It's also awesome that they made the save feature take only half as long as it did originally. It also has some very surprising and very intense plot twists in the game. Does it have flaws? Yeah, it does. I could do without the Rage mode, which makes it easier to hurt your wrist capturing Pokemon. And I also felt that it was a little bit unnecessary for them to make you have to bring in 3 Pokemon with the same move, because I felt it took up space in your party. And while I still despise the frustrating as heck past missions, I realize they're optional, but there are still some that are required if you want to complete your browser. But in spite of the flaws, the game is still brilliant. What is there to be said about Phantom Hourglass that I didn't already say in my Zelda games list? This game is pure genius. This game uses the top-down view from the 2D Zeldas and still has some instances where it uses a third-person view from the 3D Zeldas. The bosses are some of the best on the handheld Zelda games. The boat has great scenery, and while it's not as awesome as it was in Wind Waker, it works better gameplay-wise, since it's not as redundant, and you can draw a path for your boat, making controlling it easier. Some people hated going back to the Temple of the Ocean King every time they beat a dungeon, but I think it's personally a very fun stealth mission. Besides, there are new shortcuts you can access to go to deeper areas you need to go to, since by the time you get back, you'll have new weapons that you'll be able to use to get through shortcuts. I don't know what else to say, aside from the fact that I think this game is great. Of course, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. A lot of you knew this would appear on here somewhere. Diamond and Pearl take the cake for the first time I ever got a game the day it came out. I was so hyped for them, and when I finally got them, they didn't quite meet up to my expectations, but they came pretty darn close. It brought some much needed evolutions to Pokemon, and it made it so that there are both special and physical moves of each type, so that your Pokemon can do better with its physical and special stats. I also like the Battle Zone since it's a new section of the game you can go to after you beat the game. I wish it had some new evolutions in the Sinnoh Dex that you could see them before beating the game, but Platinum fixed this by expanding the Sinnoh Dex. Platinum also brought a new form to Giratina, and it brought back the Battle Frontier. Alright! There are some flaws in the game. I hated the saving a lot of data features, since the save feature is much longer if you accomplish a lot ever since you last saved your game. And while most songs are nice, there are some that just didn't really get my interest. And while I do like this more than Gold, Silver, and Crystal, I kind of preferred the Time Capsule over the Pal Park, because at least then, after transferring Gen 1 Pokemon to Generation 2, you can at least send them back, but with the Pal Park, you cannot send them back to the original game. However, that's not going to get in the way of the fact that I still think these games are really fun. Back in 2008, I saw a trailer for Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia. When I saw the trailer, I instantly knew that that game had to be on my Christmas list. I got it for Christmas, and I was not disappointed at all. It not only met my expectations, but it also surpassed them. I haven't played the original Pokemon Ranger, but I have played Shadows of Almia, and some of the mechanics from the original are implemented into this game, such as temporarily capturing certain Pokemon to use their moves to clear obstacles, which is very fun. To catch a Pokemon, you have to draw loops around the Pokemon with a stylus to fill up their friendship meter. I heard the original Pokemon Ranger had a flaw that you have to draw loops consecutively, or else the Pokemon's friendship meter will reset. Thankfully, this game made it so it doesn't reset unless you leave the Pokemon alone for a while. It may take more loops to capture, but it's completely worth it. This game also has some very memorable music and characters too, and it also has a few parts in it that are pretty intense, especially towards the end, but I don't want to spoil anything. I seriously don't get why this game doesn't get more attention, well, other than the fact that it's a spin-off, but I still think this game really needs more attention. What? Yoshi's Island DS is on here? That game's horrible! Says you. You may hate the game, but I love it. Heck, I might as well go as far to say I like this game equally as much as the original. And that's saying something considering how some of you know how much I loved the original as a kid. Sure, it has some downgrades from the original Yoshi's Island. For example, it has even less levels than the game on the Super Nintendo, and why did they have to take up the item selection screen? That allowed you to select a certain power-ups wherever you wanted. Well, except for the boss battles. And yeah, it does have some pretty cheap enemy placement, which is probably the main reason Josh Jepson hates the game, but in my mind, the good massively outweighs the bad. It has a somewhat wider variety of music, and most of the songs of the games are awesome. No, they're not! They're just remixes of the main theme! Well, newsflash, everyone, I don't care! As long as they have amazing usage of instrumentals, it shouldn't even be that big of a deal. One thing I love is that you can use different babies other than Baby Mario. Baby Mario allows you to use some of the abilities from the original, such as dashing and turning into Superstar Mario. Baby Peach can open her parasol to float on wind currents, making air travel pretty fun. Baby DK is the king of the jungle with his exploding eggs, DK dash attack, and the ability to climb and swing on certain ropes. Baby Wario and Baby Bowser are only used briefly, but they're very fun to use. Baby Wario uses a magnet which lets you pull coins towards you, and certain platforms and blocks too. With Baby Bowser, you may not be able to eat enemies to get eggs, but you almost never need them since Bowser can spit an unlimited amount of fireballs, which can't bounce off walls or activate arrow clouds, but it can melt ice blocks and light torches. I personally find this to be much better than other people make it out to be. If you saw my top 5 Pokemon Generations list, you'd probably remember that even though I like Generation 2, it was still my least favorite generation. Gold, Silver, and Crystal were pretty fun, but I thought Heart Gold and Soul Silver did a much better job. These games were basically Gen 4 remakes of Generation 2, just as Fire Red and Leaf Green were Gen 3 remakes of Generation 1. Except Fire Red and Leaf Green, while being great remakes, they were a bit disappointing, because aside from the Johto Pokemon, upgraded quality, and Generation 3 mechanics, it didn't really do what it could. Heart Gold and Soul Silver, on the other hand, did. They changed up some of the area layouts from the original to make them even more awesome. But I do like the inclusion of Pokemon following you around, which is a nice touch that I really don't get why they removed. And while I absolutely loved the Kanto region in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, it did feel a tad bit short. But some of the stuff you can now do in the Kanto region make it feel as long as it should. Not to mention, there are a few more stuff you can do after you beat Red. The after game has an after game! That is amazing! Also, Gold, Silver, and Crystal remixed some songs from Gen 1 and made them even more awesome. And Heart Gold and Soul Silver made those songs even more awesome than that! It does have some flaws in it, but not a lot, but it still does have flaws. Aside from the saving a lot of data feature, which is partly Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum's fault, the train doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. I mean, since you can now fly to any town from the Indigo Plateau, you can easily just fly there to another area in the region, which is sad because the train is actually even cooler than it originally was. But I still love the game. Please forgive me. Yes, it's true. Partners in Time is this high on the list, and I hope you can understand that. I don't know why, there's just something I absolutely adore about this game. I'll admit it does have flaws. It does stink that they made you have to buy special moves instead of replenishing points for them, but I somehow got used to it instantly. And while the hub world is a nice touch, it does kinda take out the exploration. But it's still one of the most awesome games I've played, and I definitely liked it more than Bowser's Inside Story. I don't know why, there was something I did not like about Bowser's Inside Story. I don't know why. But Partners in Time was a game I loved. It had some major improvements over Superstar Saga. The inclusion of the map on the top screen was definitely one thing that impressed me about the game. And thank goodness for the heart blocks that let you heal up just by hitting them. It's a good thing they brought this in from Paper Mario. It also lets you see a tutorial on how you use moves before you activate them for the first time. Plus, if you do multiple attack moves, it shows how much total damage you did in that turn. It rocks. This game also is one of the darkest in the series without a doubt. Not as dark as Super Paper Mario, but still pretty dark. The whole alien invasion thing is kinda cliched, but the fact that the Shroobs are abducting and presumably killing countless innocent people, that's very dark for a Mario game. One thing I love is the boss battles, which are even more creative than in the previous game, Superstar Saga. Overall, this is definitely my favorite Mario game on the DS, and I wouldn't know for sure if it's my favorite Mario RPG game or just very close to it. This game is definitely well deserving of the number 3 spot on this list. Oh yeah, Spirit Tracks is definitely one of the most awesome games in existence. I don't even know where to start with this game. Well, first I'll just say this. Remember in my 14 Zelda games list when I said that Phantom Hourglass was the most underrated in the series? Well, now I think that Spirit Tracks is the most underrated in the series. The only reason I said Phantom Hourglass is because I didn't realize how much hate Spirit Tracks got. And how much hate it got actually surprised me, because of how much of a masterpiece Spirit Tracks is. The only reason I can see people hating this game is because of the train, because it's not something you'd see in a Zelda game. Don't you just love nostalgia, fanboys? I personally love the addition of the train. Partly because I love trains, but I love in this game how when riding the train, you get to enjoy some nice scenery and music. And I definitely thought it was much more atmospheric than flying on the Loft Wings and Skyward Sword. But back to the game itself. It's definitely one of Princess Zelda's best roles, if not her best role. I mean, the fact that since she's a ghost in this game, she can possess phantoms and fight enemies. I mean, in one game she's being kidnapped by Ganondorf for the third time, and in another she's beating around enemies like there's no tomorrow. Never mess with Princess Zelda. This game also does a slightly better job at combining the top-down view from the classic Zeldas and the third person from the 3D Zeldas than Phantom Hourglass. It also has some of the greatest music on the DS. I know I talk about music a lot, but I mean it this time. It also has arguably the best boss fights on any handheld game, and that's saying something considering it has games like Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance and Bowser's Inside Story to compete with. Now I heard from Speedster that this game was meant to hold us over because of Skyward Sword's delay. Seriously? This was supposed to be a filler game? It's so hard to believe that a game that's this awesome was supposed to be a filler game. This game is just downright epic, and it was very close to being number 1. But it isn't number 1. So, what is? You'll probably have an idea, do you? Well, anyways, let's just recap the list anyways. Number 15, New Super Mario Bros. Number 14, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. Number 13, Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. Number 12, Okami Den. Number 11, Kirby Superstar Ultra. Number 10, Mario Kart DS. Number 9, Pokemon Ranger Guardian Signs. Number 8, Phantom Hourglass. Number 7, Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Number 6, Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Omnia. Number 5, Yoshi's Island DS. Number 4, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Number 3, Partners in Time. And number 2, Spirit Tracks. Some can say that Black and White 1 are the better games. Some can say that Black and White 2 are the superior games. So, which one do I prefer? Well, I would have to say, they both are. Okay, some probably had a feeling that it would be a tie, but it's true. Both Black and White 1 and 2 are amazing games. They both have so much to put them at my number 1 spot. Black and White are the ones that introduced us to this amazing generation of Pokemon, while Black and White 2 had a few differences in it. Both of them are incredibly addicting and fun to play, and they brought in some great camera angles and different seasons, which I wish they had kept in X and Y. The way I see it, people who don't care about nostalgic throwbacks would prefer the original Pokemon Black and White. It has a lot of new Pokemon, and the Unova region is different from the traditional Pokemon setting. I feel that Black and White has the better storyline. Warning, I'm about to spoil the ending to Pokemon Black and White. In the climax, they took a big risk in having Team Plasma take over the Pokemon League. Let me repeat that. Team Plasma took over the Pokemon League. That's one heck of an accomplishment as far as villains teams go. Some might complain about that, saying the Pokemon League is supposed to be the finale, but I think the risk they took really paid off because it had a very intense and very emotional finale. This game also has some of the most beautiful music in the whole series. It also brought us the ability to have 4 key items registered at once, so you don't have to alternate back and forth between the Super Rod and Bicycle being registered. People who think nostalgia is a huge factor would prefer Black and White 2. The games that I should have put at the top of my 2012 games list. This sequel, or should I say sequels, have a lot of classic Pokemon in the Unova Dex. It has some legendaries from past games that even reside in areas similar to those from the original games. The Pokemon World Tournament has gym leaders and champions from the past regions. While I would prefer it if you could face them and actually get experience points like in past generations, I still like that there is so much to do in this game, In addition to capturing all 649 Pokemon, there's a World Tournament and all the Pokestar Studios shows. And another awesome thing, if your pal runs out, you don't have to dig through your bag to get another one, since it immediately asks if you want to use another one. Great job, Game Freak! This generation fixed a lot of patience trying stuff in previous generations, and ever since these games, Pokemon games have had better storylines and been more serious. I am Meta537 II, and both Black and White 1 and 2 are my favorite DS games.